Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom podcast. This is a show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today, I am joined by a special guest. I am joined by Mr. Brandon Held. He is going to be joining us today, and we're just going to have kind of a leisure conversation. It's going to go with the flow and just learn a little bit about him and his little background. So, Brandon, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you on.
I know. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
If you could just tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do.
My name's Brandon Held. Like you said, I currently host a podcast, Life is Crazy. For my quote unquote real job, I'm a consultant for the government and I'm also a life coach. So I do a lot of different things. I'm going to be 52 years old in August. I'm married for the fourth time. I have three sons. I've served in the Air Force and the Army, and I have a master's in business administration and an undergraduate degree in communications. And so, yeah, that's just a high level overview.
Tell me a little bit about your childhood and how that shaped you.
So I had a pretty rough childhood overall in general. And I mostly realized that when I got older, looking backwards, because when you're young, your normal is your normal. You don't realize it's abnormal until you see what's happening in the rest of the world. So my first memory in life is my biological father pulling my mother out of a shower and beating her up and throwing her around in front of me. And I was 2 years old. And for the longest time, I thought this was just a like a dream or something my mind had produced. But then when I asked my mother about it when I was an adult and I was describing the background, she confirmed that it was absolutely true and she couldn't believe I remembered it because I was 2 years old. And so this would be a pattern. My father left when I was two. Well, my mother divorced him and he ran, and I never saw him or met him in my life. He's dead now. He committed suicide about 10 years ago. And so my mother would get remarried a few times and she always picked someone abusive and she would get, beat up on right in front of me as a child. And as traumatic as that is, I developed this crazy capacity to put traumatic events into the back of my brain right at almost immediately after they happen. I, in my mind, was happy because I did what I wanted to do, right? I did my own thing. I didn't have a lot of oversight from my mother as a youngster. I was a good kid. I didn't get in trouble. I didn't do anything wrong. And I always just had in my head that when I turned 17 and I was going to join the Air Force and I was going to get out of this environment because, we were poor. My mom was abused. There was a lot of alcoholism and drug abuse in my environment. I don't know. I had this ability to just block it out and say I'm going to go make my own life. This won't be my life. And so that's what I did. At 17, I had 20 bucks in my pocket and I left to get on a plane and go join the Air Force and never looked back.
Why did you choose to join the Air Force, and what was it like being in the Air Force?
I wasn't smart enough to go to college. Not at that point in my life. I didn't focus on school. I didn't do well in school. I graduated high school with a 1.5 GPA. So I just did just enough to get out. And then, I wanted to be a cop because of that childhood. It forced me to feel protective, like I wanted to help those that were innocent, like my mother, because I couldn't help her when I was young. And so it gave me this desire to want to help others, especially that are innocent. And that's still in me today, like 52, when I hear of women getting abused by a man or kids, especially kids, getting hurt by adults. Like that drives me insane. Insane. I hate that so much. It bothers me so much. So I wanted to be a cop and you can't be a cop in the civilian world till you're 21, but I could be a cop in the military. So I had decided the Air Force, after some talks with some relatives and stuff, that who had been in both the Air Force and the Army, I decided the Air Force was the way to go for me. And also, I was so dumb. I had to take the ASVAB twice. The first time I failed it, I didn't even do well enough to get the scores that I needed to be a cop in the Air Force, which was, I think, about the lowest score you had to achieve at that time to be in the Air Force was a cop. I don't know, maybe there were others, but I knew it was pretty low on the bar. So I just, I just had determination, really. That's all it was.
I can relate that to, I feel like you do have to do testing for a lot of stuff, but I hate when they compare your test grades to how you would probably be. Like, just because you don't do well on the test doesn't mean you're not going to be able to do the job. Like, I had to do ACT when I was in high school. I don't know if that was, I don't know when ACT got introduced, but I never did well during testing. I couldn't do testing. It was timed as well. So, and timed and regular testing and fall wasn't great, but I didn't do well in the ACT. I made like a 17, 18 on it. And to get into universities, you really have to have like a 20 or above. And then to be able to get full scholarships and all that, you have to do like 34. So I don't like it when I feel like a test shouldn't compare or be a factor and a roadblock into your career success.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely use that, and it's not a marker of whether or not you can be successful or not. I mean, I just had someone on my podcast the other day who's 85 years old and he owns 10 businesses and all he had was a high school education. Now he has an honorary doctorate that was given to him, but he didn't actually go to school and earn it. But so you don't have to do well in school. And I think it just becomes practice, really, because, if we dig further into my story, I did the same thing. I got out of the Air Force at 21. I took the ACT to go to college. I barely passed it. I got the minimum score to get into college. But then I did get a bachelor's degree. And then after I got that degree and I was trying to make some things work in life and that didn't work out. I decided to join the army. And so I took the ASVAB again to join the army. And this time around, because I had been through 4 years of college and I had the practice of taking tests and actually trying, which I didn't do in high school, I didn't even try. I actually got a perfect score on the ASVAB before I joined the army. So the growth was tremendous. And I think it was just, the practice of taking tests.
On top of everything that you went through during childhood, I also see that you unfortunately lost a daughter, which I apologize for that. I hate to hear that. What can you tell about that situation?
So yeah, as I said, I'm on my fourth marriage. I was married 3 times. My first marriage, we were both in the Air Force, stuck in Minot, North Dakota together. And I think it was just a marriage of convenience and loneliness. And while we were married, she got pregnant, which wasn't supposed to happen. She was, supposed to be taking birth control. We weren't supposed to be having kids, but she did get pregnant. And while she was pregnant, she found out she had a weak cervix. And for people who don't know what that is, it means the cervix is not strong enough to hold the baby in. And that's not something until it happens to you. There's no test for that. So she was pregnant, and I don't remember how many months along she was, like 5 maybe. And the baby just started coming out, like she was starting to give birth, and it was way too early. And so they took her to the hospital. We took her to the hospital. She got flipped upside down, basically, to try to see if the baby could go back in. And she was there for a couple days and it wasn't happening. And then the doctors came in and were like, we're at the point now where we're risking your life. If we don't turn you back over, you're going to die. And my ex-wife stubbornly was, fine, kill me. I don't care. I'd rather die than be flipped over and lose this baby. But eventually she got talked into it. And so she did flip over. And we were told that, yeah, you're going to give birth to this daughter prematurely. And when she comes out, she's going to scream and cry, and she's going to seem small, but like a normal baby. But her lungs are underdeveloped, and there's nothing we can do for her to develop her and allow her to keep living. And so she's just going to die in your arms. And that's exactly what happened. And I was 22 years old, and this was obviously a super heavy traumatic thing to have to go through in life, and I didn't know how to handle it, and she didn't know how to handle it. And so yeah, it just always, it caused problems between us the rest of the way until we got divorced, and obviously something we've had to deal with the rest of our life.
You have had mentioned that you had been through three divorces already, and you're now on your married for a fourth time. What is it about this marriage that is different from the past?
Everything. I mean, all my marriages before had something that was good, but then something that was missing or something that was bad. And um, so this marriage is, she's like the whole package. Like everything's good. Like she's beautiful. We're deeply in love. We communicate well together. We understand each other. It's just, there's a lot of my other relationships were high highs where, I was really happy, really great, and then super toxic lows where, we hated each other, or we talked about getting divorced or breaking up, whatever the case is. And this marriage is not like that at all. We've been together for almost 5 years, married for four, and it's just been a rock steady, solid, loving relationship. And I love her very much, and I'm sure if she was here she would say the same thing.
You have your career has been a bit of a roller coaster ride. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, when I originally joined the Air Force at 17, I thought that was going to be my life. I thought that was going to be my career. But, something really negative happened about the time I needed to decide whether or not I was going to reenlist. So then I decided the Air Force wasn't for me. So I got out, went to college, got my degree, and then I was doing all kinds of different jobs. I was a bartender, I was a salesman, I was a general manager of a Finish Line shoe store, a general manager of a Radio Shack, or not Radio Shack, a Circuit City. They don't exist anymore. Neither one of those exist anymore. So that's why I said it wrong. And then, none of that was working out. So I decided to join the Army. So I joined the Army. I got an MBA. And then when I got out of the Army, I got my first quote unquote corporate job, and I was working at, and again, I thought I was in a situation was where this is going to be where I'm at till I retire. This is going to be my career. And then 3 years into it, there were defense cuts made. And because I guess I came in at a high salary for a junior level guy, they decided to lay me off. It wasn't performance based. So they just let me go. And now I was kind of back to square one. And at this point, I was married again. I had two small boys, and I was the sole provider of my family. So it was devastating. I was really lost in that time, but eventually, my ex-father-in-law would help me get a job with a government contractor that was an hour and a half away from where I lived. So I had to commute 3 hours a day for work. And, obviously you can only do that for so long until it takes its toll. And so I decided to leave that company and go to another company that was closer because of that exact reason, the commute. And so when I went to my new job, which was also a government, or it was a contractor for again. So now I was back at where I got laid off, but I wasn't an employee. I was a contractor working for someone else. 3 years into that job, cut that contract with that company, and I got laid off again. And this time it was much more devastating because now I was going through my third divorce. So I lost my wife, my two kids, and now I lost my job. I had to sell my house, and I was ba- basically I had nothing. I had a few dollars in my pocket, but not enough to survive. And I was homeless. And I had to figure out what I was going to do, what was going to be my next step. I already told you my childhood and who I came from. So I have no support system, I have no backup. So I literally was just trying to survive at that point. And so eventually, years later, I finally got another government contracting job. I'm a consultant for the government now. I've been doing that for 5 years now. And so I've been back on my feet and I'm back to a good living again. But I had some very low lows where I was suicidal and, was questioning everything in life, whether or not everything I have done, going to college, joining the military twice, was it all worth it? Was it all for nothing? And so it was a very tough time, and I really thought my life was over at one point.
How has therapy and education helped you through all of these difficult times?
I think therapy because uh sometimes just talking about what you're dealing with and going through is really crucial in helping you, I guess, get over it. You don't always need these mind opening experiences that go, like you don't really necessarily need that. Sometimes you just have to talk through it. And while you're doing that, A, it helps you feel better, but B, it also reminds you, like, oh yeah, you've been through some shit and you always recovered. You always came out the other side and you've been better for it. And that's still true. So, I feel like I'm obviously, right, the best man I could be at this point based off of everything I've gone through because I wasn't always the greatest man. Sometimes I was more selfish and I cared more about what I wanted. And, I wasn't the greatest husband or even father. And when you go through these really hard times, it makes you do a lot of looking at what you're doing and how you're behaving and what you could do better and what you should do better. And there's a huge part of me that believes I had to go through everything I went through to become who I am today, because I wouldn't be who I am had I not gone through these super low lows. And so therapy really helped me understand that and see all that. And education is, I don't know that I feel like education is just proving you can complete a goal. I don't know if it's made my life better, other than obviously it's opened doors that would not have been opened had I not had the education.
What have been some of your biggest inspirations?
Oh wow. I don't outside of just wanting to be a better father and a better husband, I mean that's really been it, just for me to become a better man and be the best man I can be. I never really had much for someone to look up to or someone to try to, be like or anything like that. I did have one leader who took me under her wings in my subcontracting job where I had to commute 3 hours a day, and she was the vice president of the company, and she was a former lieutenant colonel in the army, and we got along famously, and she just really helped mentor me, really. And she helped me learn a lot of things, but just as far as like looking up to people or wanting to be inspired by anyone, it's really just been finding self inspiration and the fact that I want to lead by example. I want my sons to look up to me and, respect me and realize that everything I did was in their best interest and for them.
You are the host of the Life is Crazy podcast, which, for everyone, he mentioned it earlier. Why did you start the podcast for?
Oh, that's a good question. So, my wife and others have heard my life story, which I've, barely scratched the surface here. I know you've asked questions, but the Life is Crazy podcast episodes 1 through 25 are my life story in detail, and that's 12 and a half hours. So you can
Wow.
imagine trying to scratch the surface of 12 and a half hours of information in a 45-minute podcast. So yeah, everyone was telling me you should write a book. Your life has been so unique and so different, and you've survived so much with your childhood and your suicide attempts and everything else, to even be someone that can hold his head up high and have a smile on his face and be financially successful and have a great marriage and loving sons. You should tell people about this so people can realize that they can go through things too, and they can still come out the other side and be great and still live a great happy life. And so I'm not a great book writer. I actually made 2 attempts to sit down and try to write the book, and I would get very, very not far in. And I just wouldn't have the capacity to go back and keep writing. So one day I just decided I'm just going to start a podcast. I'm just going to tell my story in a podcast because that's what I'm more comfortable doing. I'm just more comfortable talking than I am writing. And so I actually had recorded my whole life story, the first 25 episodes, before I ever released the podcast. So when I started the podcast, I had all 25 episodes recorded already.
That's just such an amazing thing, being able to record 25 episodes. I could probably do the same, which I've talked about my mental health, and I did like a whole 50-minute episode on that, and then talked about my school experience. Well, did my classmates, which I released that one, that was like an hour and a half. And then I did like a school experience podcast, which I thought taught for 2 hours, but ended up being 3 hours when I started editing it. And I thought, oh, this is gonna be fun to edit. I was like, oh, I can relate so much about your father as well. I've not talked about it on the podcast, but I probably want to make a episode about my family, but just give like a brief. My father was not around when I was young. He was essentially kind of a came in, came out situation. My mom was raped by him. She lived out on her own for, I think she was 21, 22 at the time, and she was living out by herself. And this was back in 2001. And she came home. She accidentally left a key in the door, and my father came in, was I think, attempted to go and rob the place, and then saw that a woman lived there by herself. And so he took it upon himself to sexually assault her. And then after he did that, he left, and they never saw him again. And so I don't know who my father is at all.
And he was never caught. How horrible for your mother. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, the police got involved, and which from where I'm from, our police are dumb. I don't think they know what 2 plus 2 is. And so they got involved and they did a whole investigation, but he was just gone, long gone. And kids made fun of me for it when I grew up. People made fun of me for it because they thought it was just odd. And they would always ask questions. And of course, I didn't know any questions. I didn't know anything. And
Right.
so my grandfather was kind of my father figure because my mom and I lived with my grandparent because she couldn't, after that happened, she had moved back in with her parents after that whole situation had transpired. And so that's how I lived. I just lived with my mom and my grandparents, and my grandfather was a father figure. But yeah, never had a father growing up. So and it hurts when I see people sometimes with their families and fathers because it's a lot of stuff that I didn't get to do when I was growing up. But my mom's done such a great job and a fantastic job of raising me. She doesn't get enough credit. She doesn't get enough credit, and she always thinks that she's failed along the way. And I said, you've done more than most mothers would have. Most parents, if they were a single parent, they would give their child up for adoption. That would have been that.
Yeah, I mean that story is incredible. And one thing I would ask you to reframe it is you're lucky you didn't know. that man. You're lucky he wasn't in your life because he was obviously a scumbag and a piece of shit. And that's how I always felt about my biological father. And I never felt bad not having him in my life ever. Not as a kid, not well, when I became an adult, he tried to, get to me through my sister who did want to know him, who did want to be a part of his life, but then, ended up regretting it because he was a piece of shit. So, you should reframe that thinking and just focus on more what an amazing mother you have. It's a really tragic story. And, I appreciate you sharing that with me here today. But yeah, what a tough woman she is.
And in future, she's always said, I've just messed up so much along the way. And I'm like, no, you haven't. No, you have not. And that's why me and her are so close. I think a lot of people don't understand why I'm so close with my mom because I call her every day. I talk to her every day and tell her everything that's going on. And most people are like, why do you do that? I said, well, y'all just don't understand that she's been there for me for everything. And I'm my only child as well. So, of course, her 100% attention's on me.
Why do
And
why do people question that? That's my question. I mean, it's your relationship with your mother. I don't get that.
Alabama living. That's what it is.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. Yeah.
That's just how Southern people are. They're nosy. We're always nosy about that.
That's one thing to be nosy. It's
And
another thing to interject an opinion on the fact that you call your mom every day. So that's wild to me. That should be something that should be commended and looked up to, not frowned upon.
hmm which you know, I'll probably do a podcast about my family on there, and I'll just go into further detail about it because there's a lot more that I could say about it. But yeah, that's just kind of a brief thing. For people that want to check you out and know more about your story and some things about your podcast, where all can they find you at?
So yeah, I'm in multiple places. I'm pretty much in, anywhere you can listen to a podcast. You just type in Brandon Held, Life is Crazy. You can find me there. I have my own website, brandonheld.com, and I'm actually doing a iPad giveaway for people that sign up for my life coaching. So depending on which program you sign up for, it will dictate the number of entries that you get for the iPad giveaway. So I have three subscription plans. I have a $25 a month subscription plan, and I don't charge the full year at a time like some people do. I do ask that you commit to a year, but I still only charge you the $25 a month. So it's a very affordable plan, which gives you access to my own GPT that I made personally. So it's like putting my brain into a GPT. So it's like getting my life coaching, and you have access to that 24/7. And it's a really great tool. So yeah, I have the $25 a month version, the $50 a month version, and the $100 a month version. And so if you do the $25 a month version, you get one entry per month because I'll be doing this at the end of August. If you do the $50, you'll get two entries per month. And if you do the $100, you'll get four entries per month. So that's a promotion I'm doing right now at brandonheld.com. And then also I'm trying to grow my Instagram, which is, BH underscore life underscore is underscore crazy. You and I follow each other on there. So we are connected there. And
Mm-hmm.
finally, I have a YouTube, which is Brandon Held underscore life is crazy. And I'm so intrigued by your story. So I think we're going to have you on my show and we're going to have to talk more about your story.
Well, I'm open to that, and I'm about to go enter the giveaway to get a free iPad. Uh, let me check my bank account first, and I might go and get me an iPad. But Brandon, I appreciate you so much for being on the show today. I think your story is very inspiring, and I think a lot of people are going to relate to it. Again, I'll put off his links down in the description box so that you can go back and check him out at a later time, and all of his information will be down there. As he said, he's doing an iPad giveaway, so if you sign up for any of the plans, you have at least one entry and an attempt to get a free iPad. So highly recommend you go check him out. Brandon, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you for having me, Noah.
I have got to say, that was probably one of the best interviews I've ever done so far for this show. His story was so impactful and it was so touching to me. Just sitting here listening to it again, oh, it's such an impactful story. I wanted just to say again, thank you, Brandon, for being on today. It was such an honor to have you on there, and thank you for telling your story. But anyways, to wrap things up, I appreciate everyone for listening today. Of course, no survey, as it usually is when we have a guest on. For social media platforms, if you want to keep in touch with me, Lethal Venom podcast on Instagram and TikTok. I don't know why I keep saying pod. Lethal Venom podcast on Instagram and TikTok. For the YouTube channel, it's Noah's Podcast, and that's where you'll find my other two podcasts that I do. Music Talks, which is a music-based show where I talk about music and albums, and Southern Reads, a predominantly book podcast. So if those two things interest you, you're more than welcome to check them out. You can get those two podcasts and this one. It's available on Apple Podcasts. It's also available on Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and basically wherever you get your podcast from. Just a reminder for you, I know we just said it, he is still doing his iPad giveaway, so make sure to go over to his website, and I will make sure to have all of his links in the description below. Thank you guys to everyone that paid attention and listened today. This was such a very special episode. And lastly, if you have any questions or concerns about anything, just feel free to email me, lethalvenompod@gmail.com. And I hope y'all have a great rest of your day, week, night, whenever you're listening to it, and I will catch you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom. Y'all take care.